And in Addis Ababa, and I know some of you have been there, the next best thing to look to Disneyland is a library. You will have kids lined up down the street to come to a library. So what we did is we opened up a public library within our community development center, thereby almost forcing the HIV positive kids and the HIV negative kids to intermingle. And so at the end of the day, these kids, the HIV negative kids, would go home and say, you know what, Mom, you know what, Dad, you're not right. They're just like me. They're just like the kids next door. And it's a program that's worked really, really well. And I know that we've got limited time, and I really want to hear from Lanka, but let me leave you with one last story. Daniel lived with his grandmother. His mother had passed away 2 years earlier, and they had survived from day to day on the streets of Addis, within the same neighborhood. And unfortunately, his grandmother passed away from the same disease that took his mother. And so 9-year-old Daniel was left alone. And through the goodness of the neighborhood, Daniel survived on the streets, maybe getting a handout here or there. About 2 weeks after his grandmother passed away, Daniel himself started to get ill. The neighborhood knew what it was, but they took him for a routine check and he tested positive for HIV. Almost giving up on Daniel, somebody had heard in the neighborhood of AHOPE. They took Daniel to AHOPE, and within 3 weeks, Daniel started to react to the antiretroviral medications he was given. And today, this is Daniel. He's happy, he's healthy, he's going to school, and he will join his forever family this December. And it was 2 weeks away from Daniel. So we're real proud of Daniel and where he's come from and where he's going. Now with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to somebody much more important than me. It's that number one that we talked about, Lanka Domberger, who's been, here's a snapshot of Lanka's family. She has been one of our shining heroes at AHOPE for Children, not only in her family and foundation's support of our organization, but most importantly, the pioneering spirit that has driven her family and caused her to adopt an HIV-positive child. Lanka, please join us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lanka, and let's see. I'm here to just tell you a little bit about our family and my story, and then I can open it up to any questions. But let's see, where did we start? We started adopting with my older girls, the 2 girls at the top, from Kazakhstan. Oh, okay. The older girls at the top, they're from Kazakhstan. And at that time, someone was asking me what made you adopt. It was truly a whim. I'm not going to, make myself seem better than I am. I had a whim to adopt, and whether it be a good idea or not, they actually gave us the go-ahead, and we did it. And for a couple of years, we just had our 2 daughters. Then I think after that, there was a calling. I really felt that this was what I was meant to do in my life, and my husband felt the same. We're both writers, so we work from home. And we began to adopt children, some of them with various different special needs. So we got calls about kids with every special need under the sun, and I don't know if everybody here has, or some people here have adopted or are looking to adopt and are thinking about some special needs. But you feel free to ask me any questions about any special needs, because I know a lot of them. Basically, I have 2 children with fetal alcohol syndrome. I have a daughter born with severe brain damage, who survived 7 strokes. I have a daughter born with Klumpke's palsy and who is partially blind in one eye. I have 2 daughters actually born with HIV. One who is presently HIV positive, one who converted, and I can explain that to you later. So I dealt with a lot of different issues. But the most important issue here is, obviously, you guys are coming to find out a little bit more about HIV adoption. My daughter, Guinevere, right there, she came to us in January. At that time, we knew she was HIV positive. She was a great girl living in Addis, and actually was not living at AHOPE, strangely enough. Had gotten herself into an orphanage in Addis when they didn't know that she was HIV positive. So at that time, she charmed everybody because she's the world's cutest person. And they started looking for a home for her. They didn't, usually the way it works is, there's tons of different agencies at this point that go through Ethiopia. Some of the big ones are like Children's Home, AI, and what they usually do is then when they get a child, GladMe, any of these agencies, they get a child, they test positive, they move those children over to AHOPE. It happens almost every time. But she charmed them, and she ended up staying there. She was there for a full year before, through the different pipeline, they heard about us, and they heard that we'd already adopted a child who was really hard to place. Now, this is a child who was HIV positive at birth, but converted, so she wasn't even HIV positive. But people who had waited on the list, my daughter, Valentine, waited on the list in Vietnam. I don't know if anybody knows how Vietnam kind of went through a big shutdown about a year and a half ago. People who had waited for years to adopt a child from Vietnam would not take her. Another family. There was not one family that they could find or take her. Now, she was HIV negative. She had been born with HIV because you have your mother's antibodies in your body. And when they retest you, they have two different tests. One's called a PCR, one's called an ELISA. Doesn't matter. When they retest kids, a lot of them test negative once the antibodies of the mother from breastfeeding and so forth have left the body. So she was an identical twin. Her identical twin passed, and she was negative. Still couldn't replace her. So you can see the stigma, not just in Ethiopia, the stigma here. That's a reality. That's a reality you would have to deal with every day. But I know a lot of you may be churchgoers here, or maybe churchgoers and believers. There is no better work in my belief system. I'm a Quaker, so I'm kind of picky, but no better work than supporting people who have no support, people who are stigmatized. And I think, in terms of HIV, it is there is more miseducation or lack of education about HIV than anything else in our society. Anything else. Because HIV is a very, very manageable special need in terms of adoption, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of specialists. If you speak to a lot of international adoption specialists, they will tell you it is manageable. Everybody who's looking to adopt would say, I'm only open to cleft, and da 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 da. There's a lot of issues that go along with a cleft palate. There's a lot of issues that go along with all of these things, and people don't look at special needs that you can't see. I was talking to Tom about it earlier. There are certainly my children that were born in Kazakhstan, my daughter and my son. My son has severe fetal alcohol syndrome. Greatest kid, so happy, so sweet. But to get to that point, it was so much work. I did not think we would come through it. I mean, of course we came through it, but I did not feel, there were 2 years where I felt like we wouldn't come through it. HIV is a medical issue. Again, it's a medical issue. And the biggest issue you will deal with, is the stigma. The stigma that your child will go through, maybe every day of your life, you will have to go through that with your child. So that I think is something you have to be realistic about. But also the stigma that is going to happen, throughout school, social life. You'll get so many questions. But I really do believe on some level we can be ambassadors. We can be ambassadors for people treating other people like human beings. Because that's what we're here for. That's the only reason we're here, in my opinion. I don't see any other purpose to be on a completely congested planet rather than to make it a humane experience for absolutely everybody that we can. And you can't make it that for everybody, but you can make it for 1 or 2 people. And that really sets off a chain. So So that's us. I mean, we've been married for 15 years. We've been adopting basically every year for the past 10 years. Wow. And we're done. We're complete. No, we are. We've completed. Really, it's really strange.
We'll call you in a year. Yeah.
Really, no, I swear. And I never said this before. My friends were like, "Oh, you've never said that." I always said, "No, no, no, I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm really done." Right before I adopted Guinevere, I said I wanted to adopt one more African child because I'm black, but you can't tell what I am. And so I had one child at that time who was obviously black. And we live in Pacific Palisades. I grew up in LA. I grew up in Malibu. So, and it hasn't changed that much. So I was like, you know what? One other girl to talk hair, to be like, girl, we're not getting our hair wet, right? You don't want to have all these like Asian sisters going, and you're going. Yeah, so I said one more, and then they have someone happen to call me about Guinevere. They said there's this little girl, she's a year old. At that time she'd be here, because paperwork takes a long time. Which, by the way, I can answer tons of questions if people have questions, and nothing's too private. But something that's really changed, you should know, is as of 15 months ago, I don't even actually remember exactly when it happened. I think it happened in February. 15 months ago, they started to be taught that the immigration laws are going to change. Now, when George Bush was in office, George Bush started paperwork and started to change a law that had gone into effect during the Reagan years, which was a ban on people. This is when nobody knew what HIV was. Nobody knew. So they said, you know, no immigrants. We don't want people coming vacationing here and meeting somebody and, you know, whatever. So in the 80s there was a ban. But what the CDC learned and what people have learned over time, through many, many, many studies, is that it was not a threat. It was not becoming a threat. There was not an immigrant threat of HIV. So Bush started the paperwork, and for years it's been kind of churning, and in February a law came into effect that got rid of that ban. So even though you were actually able to adopt before then, we started our adoption before then, you had to do this whole extra step, which was you would go in, you go to Addis, you do your whole visit, you'd adopt, then you would go to get your visa at the embassy, and they would reject you. You knew it. You knew you had to be rejected before you then tried to get your waiver, which you could do. People did it. They, you know, I think as of last year, what, like 80 people had done it. I mean, it wasn't a big number. People had done it, and it wasn't that people were being constantly rejected, but it was this big extra step. It was not a fair step, considering there are many kids who were coming over with different diseases. There were much, by the way, people coming with HEP. HEP's a much, I mean, that's a much bigger special need, but it doesn't have the stigma. I mean, the HIV stigma is still there. Trust me, we've definitely experienced it, and I think I should share that with you. But in general, in February, things changed. So the process is exactly like any other adoption for anybody who's interested. That would not be a bigger. I think there are many positives for the adoption community if people are open to adopting children with HIV. Because A, it is manageable. B, you can get, there's a lot of funding for medication. You live in LA. This is like, we have some of the best HIV doctors you will ever have. I mean, you're a little far, I'm in Pacific Palisades, so I'm near UCLA, but I'm telling you, these people take complete care of us. Complete care. They make sure that our medication doesn't even come from the pharmacy. It comes to our house. Mom's pharmacy brings it to our house. So there's a lot of positive things. There's also positive, a lot of countries are closed at this point. So, you know, it's getting harder and harder to adopt internationally, even though there's not less orphans. This is, to me, a way a lot of people who want to adopt younger, there's plenty of children who need homes, who have HIV, and it is manageable. And I think the more that people do it, the more it will change people's views. Until people openly raise children with this disease, I don't think that people's idea and image was too strong for the 80s. People remember too strong, and then it didn't, there was no in between. It kind of went away. People stopped talking about it. So it was like AIDS, death, and then